Why don't you just make your money here in Germany first and then move to Africa later to live like a king? It's what a friend asked me when I first said I was planning to move to Kenya. He meant well, but even then something about it didn't sit right with me. I wasn't trying to chase some fantasy life on the beach. I wanted to build something, to figure out who I could become in a place with no written script for me. That comment stuck with me because it raised a deeper question. Is life better in Europe or on the African continent? After growing up in Germany and building my life in Kenya for the past 2.5 years, I'm ready to give you an honest answer. And this time it's not a checklist, this is a real story of what I lost, what I gained, and what gave me a deeper purpose. Germany gave me structure, clarity, and systems. I grew up in a country where everything was scheduled, where rules meant stability, and where life had a clear path. You go to school, you start working, you save money, and then you retire. By the time I was in my early 20s, I was already working 2 jobs and that more than 60 hours a week. One within my family business and another one in a restaurant. I was grinding, and to be very honest, I loved it. But I also had a plan in my mind. I wanted to move to Kenya. I knew it would be quite expensive. I knew no one was going to do it for me. So therefore I started to stack every euro I could. I stayed in, said no to trips, no to parties, even no to rest. In some ways, Germany gave me that drive, the discipline and the obsession with doing. It taught me to show up on time, to deliver, and especially to over-deliver. But at the same time, something else was happening within me. I felt boxed in. The system that raised me started to feel more like a glass ceiling. Like I could see where life was going, and I wasn't fully sure if this was the way I wanted to go. Everything was working, but somehow it wasn't working for me. Even though I felt like I was succeeding partially, something was missing. Like I was living someone else's vision of a good life. Therefore, the dream to move stopped being just a goal and started to feel like a necessity for me. 1.5 years after I decided to make the move to Kenya, Nairobi finally greeted me not with a grand welcome, but with small human moments that left a big mark on me. My Uber driver who picked me up from the airport after I just landed to start my new life here asked me, "So are you one of us now?" And then he started laughing. But he meant it in the most generous way, as if he wanted to say you're just very welcome here. People were open, curious, generous. The warmth wasn't just in the weather, it was in the people. But let me be clear as well, nothing here came easy. The systems I had mastered in Germany, they didn't translate here. What worked there didn't work here. I had to let go of structures I carried and start listening, observing, and start asking questions. Time moved differently here, conversations took longer, progress wasn't linear, but somehow it felt like it was richer for me. I found myself in places I've never planned for, sitting on plastic chairs in dusty courtyards, having 2-hour chats with people I just met, and realizing this was actually partially what I came here for. I wasn't just switching locations, I was learning how to live life differently. But this also forced me to confront parts of myself I had never questioned before. My pace, my expectations, even my definition of success. Therefore, I began to let go of the urge of control and lean into something deeper that was presence for me. In Germany, I really optimized everything. In Kenya, I began to live life in the present moment. And that shift from control to connection changed my perspective. Here's the truth I came to understand, what I think nobody is telling you. When you move countries, you don't just gain a new culture, you also start losing parts of your old ones. In my first few months, I found myself struggling with the smallest things. How slow things moved, how people wouldn't respond on time, how plans would change last minute. It drove me a little bit crazy at times. At first, I judged it and I wanted to fix it, but then I realized I wasn't just facing a different culture, I was also facing myself. All the values I had observed in Germany were now clashing with systems that run on relationships and time that flows differently. But the more I tried to impose my own expectations, the more frustrated I became. Therefore, I had to unlearn not just habits but also identities. I had to stop being the person who needed everything to go his way, who thought efficiency was always the answer. And to be honest, this was a humbling experience, but it was also one of the most freeing ones I ever experienced. Because beneath all of the frustration, I started to discover patience, flexibility, a deeper kind of strength. And here's another truth, and this is not everything about moving to Kenya was better, and not everything about Germany was bad. I mean, in Germany, I never worried about electricity cuts, or getting overcharged by a plumber, or having to tiptoe through systems just to get a basic government document. Sometimes, to be also honest here on this side, yes, I missed the efficiency, the calm, the way things just worked. But every time I thought about going back, something pulled me back in, because I knew what I would be giving up. Because while Germany offered comfort to me, Kenya gave me something I didn't even know that I needed. The kind of mental space that lets you hear yourself think again. In Germany, I was always performing at work or in everyday life, and even if I'm still performing here in Kenya, I could also just be at times. Therefore, I began to trust my gut more, to stop seeking validation, to stop playing any roles, and instead build a life that actually fits me. It wasn't perfect, and it might still not be perfect, but it is truly mine. There was a point, maybe 10 months in the journey of moving here, where I genuinely thought, did I make a mistake? Work wasn't flowing, and I faced multiple challenges at the same time. And the initial honeymoon phase you experience when going to a new place is also at that time had worn off. I remember sitting on my balcony one night and looking into the sky, wondering if I was just fooling myself. But then something happened that changed everything once again. A friend of mine I had mentored a while back sent me a message. He said, "I've been seeing what you're up to, and you inspired me to finally start something myself. Just seeing you by doing it made me believe that I can do it too." It was small, but for me at this point it hit me very hard, because for the first time I realized I wasn't just building a life for myself, I was also showing others what's possible if they step out of their comfort zones. And therefore I stopped measuring my success by Western standards. I started measuring it by the impact I had and by the alignment I felt by doing the things I did. And that's when I understood I wasn't in Kenya instead of Germany. I was in Kenya because that's where my story was meant to unfold. I didn't become someone new, I just started peeling back the layers. One of the biggest shifts for me actually happened not in a meeting or on a trip I made here, but in silence, alone, journaling at night, and reading my old entries. Simply by watching life pass by and also seeing how far I've already came made me just rethink everything. I stopped obsessing over what I should be doing and started asking what actually feels aligned for me. It was during this time that I began questioning not just how I work, but also for the first time why I worked. In Germany, I had learned to attach my worth to productivity, to measure my value by outcomes and producing as much as possible. But in Kenya, I met people who had less and yet carried a sense of peace I had never known until this point. That made me realize that I had spent years chasing external validation. Therefore, the real shift I needed to make was internal, learning to anchor my value in who I am and not in what I produce. That mindset changed my perspective from how I run my business to how I show up in relationships. It wasn't very loud, neither dramatic, but for me it was one of the most important shifts I needed to make internally. So the question again, is life better in Europe or in Africa? It's not a simple answer, and honestly I think anyone who gives you one probably hasn't lived both lives properly. Because here is the truth, at least let's say here's my truth. Living in Europe gave me structure. Traveling through Africa helped me to find my true identity. Germany had taught me how to function, and Kenya has taught me how to flourish. But the important thing here is that both places shaped me in a different way, and I'm grateful for both of these experiences. Therefore, I stopped looking for the better place because I don't think that there is any. Instead, I started asking a different question. What parts of each place actually serve the life I want to live? Maybe the goal isn't to choose one over the other one. Maybe the real freedom comes from choosing the parts of each that make sense for you and just for you, because each perspective of anyone is a different one. The more time I spent in Kenya, the more I started noticing something strange. People back home, they would ask me, so are you ever coming back? As if I was moving to the African continent was a phase or bold experiments before returning back to real life. But the longer I stayed, the less I saw this as an escape, and the more I saw it as a return, but not to some ancestral land or romanticized idea, but to my true purpose. Because moving here wasn't about picking one continent over the other one. It was about giving myself permission to redefine what success and happiness actually look like. And this time on my own terms. But this also meant stepping away from the path that was already paved for me back in Germany. Therefore, I had to start building a complete new one, even if I didn't have a map at all and I didn't know how it would turn out or where I would end up. I used to think moving to another country was about chasing better opportunities, escaping something, or starting simply over. But now I can say that I see it a little bit differently. For me, it's not about Africa or Kenya being better than Western countries anymore. For me, it's now rather about recognizing that every place shapes you and having the courage to choose how you want to be shaped. The West taught me structure, discipline, and ambition, what I'm grateful for. And Kenya and the other African countries I spent my time in, they reminded me to feel, to connect, to live slower but also deeper. Both have taught me a lot of value, but neither of them has it all. And that's the thing most people forget, at least from what I see now, is that life is full of trade-offs. The real power is in choosing the parts that serve you personally, your growth, your vision, and your values. Even if you never move countries, even if you leave your hometown never as well, just by becoming aware of how your environment is shaping you, that alone can change your life, from what I've experienced. Because once you see it, you cannot stop living on autopilot anymore and just do the things you're doing on a daily basis. You can start to live intentionally. So here's my question for you now. What parts of your environment actually align with the life you want to live? And what are you ready to leave behind to live the life you want to live? Let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear your story and what you think about this. I appreciate you listening to my experiences, and thanks so much for watching. I see you in the next video. Bye.